Are you still awake? Late at night only those who cannot sleep or do not want to dare to listen to what history has to say. Perhaps you, like me, carry with you an era that no one speaks of anymore. But tonight I will take you to a narrow street in Florence in the year 1363, when velvet was more dangerous than steel and a single sleeve could change a life. Don't leave too early tonight. Some stories are so small that if you leave too soon, they may never be told again. Now close your eyes, lie still, let your breath slow, and step gently into the soft, dust-swept light of an early Florentine morning. You push open a warped wooden door. A tiny brass bell jingles overhead, shyly announcing your arrival. The scent of beeswax and damp linen fills your lungs. Bolts of fabric line the walls, wools, linens, and tucked carefully away behind a threadbare curtain. Two forbidden things, crimson velvet and ultramarine silk. You don't touch them, of course. Just being in their presence feels like a crime, which of course it is. The tailor, Master Benedetto, squints up at you over the rim of his crooked spectacles. You again, he says, though his tone is fond, like someone resigned to feeding a stray cat every morning. His hands are calloused, stained with indigo and wine, and he's been threading a golden cord through the cuff of a glove that looks much too fine for any honest Florentine. You've come to admire the gloves. Again. They are red velvet stitched with gold thread in the shape of curling vines, each fingertip tipped in mother-of-pearl buttons. They belong to no one yet. They sit waiting like a spell, resting in a box lined with crushed poppy petals. The tailor says they're for a bishop's cousin, but everyone knows they're meant for Il Cavaliere, the rich son of a spice merchant who insists he descended from knights. And in Florence that insistence is almost believable if you have gloves like these. Outside a bell tolls from the campanile. It is the hour of the merchants. Men with velvet sleeves shuffle past the open door. Some try to hide the shimmer of their cuffs under drab cloaks, but the morning sun is merciless. Others stride openly, daring the law to catch them. A boy barely 12 runs past in brocade, and you can hear someone whisper, "He'll be fine by nightfall." You sit on the edge of the workbench. What if someone like me wore those gloves, you ask? Benedetto chuckles. Then you'd have to pay 5 florins in fine and 6 in shame, he says. And you'd better be quick about it before the Chamber of Righteous Appearance comes knocking. He taps his needle twice on the wood like it's a judge's gavel. That was the name of the group, believe it or not, **** La Camera della Giusta Apparenza, ***, the Chamber of Righteous Appearance, a group of men tasked by law to keep Florence morally humble, one hemline at a time. They went door to door. They attended weddings. They lurked in tailors' shops. And worst of all, they measured sleeves. If your sleeve was longer than your social rank allowed, they took notes. Or worse, they took you. You hear a knock, not at the shop door, at the next building. Someone has reported the fishmonger's wife for her garnet sash again. A few minutes later, the constable walks past with the sash in hand like a trophy. From behind the curtain, Benedetto mutters, "She'll just make another. She always does." Florence in 1363 is full of these small wars. Fabric becomes status, buttons become weapons, and the laws, oh the laws, try to keep the illusion of order. That year, the *** Sumptuary Law of 1363 ** was issued. You remember the parchment nailed outside the Palazzo Vecchio. It fluttered in the breeze like a threat disguised as poetry. The law listed what each class could wear: servants no more than 1 ring, widows black only, tailors no velvet ever. Even the number of pleats in your tunic was regulated. Historians today still argue whether the point was moral reform or just envy wrapped in policy. "Let me tell you something," Benedetto says softly, pulling a stitch tight. 2 years ago, a shoemaker's wife wore a damask skirt to a festival. The fabric was old, but the pattern had been banned for 2 decades. A magistrate's nephew saw her, thought she looked too noble. She was fined so heavily her husband had to sell half his stock. They moved to Pisa. You blink because of a skirt. He nods because she wore it well. Outside, the street fills with the chatter of footsteps and market calls. The morning light changes, slipping through the stained glass shard embedded in the window pane. The colors paint the gloves redder, almost bleeding. And then an odd moment. The door creaks open again. A tall, hooded figure steps in silent. Benedetto stiffens. You feel it too, something quiet but wrong. The hooded man doesn't speak. He sets a pouch on the counter, gold spills slightly. Then he points at the gloves. Benedetto doesn't move. You are not permitted, he says gently, to purchase these. The man's voice is soft and strange. What if I don't plan to wear them in Florence? Where then? The man pauses. Avignon, for a coronation, mine. You don't know whether to laugh or curtsy. Benedetto does neither. He simply closes the box. They are not for sale. When the man leaves, the room feels smaller. You realize your hand is still hovering near the red velvet. The fabric that could change you, elevate you, ruin you. You wonder about that man, who he was, if he really was heading to Avignon, if he had truly spoken of coronation, or if it was all theater, as Florence so often is. Historians, you know, debate the identities of such clients. Some believe they were spies smuggling signs of prestige across borders. Others say they were frauds, but no one agrees on the records. Too many aliases, too few consequences. Benedetto sighs. You should go before you want them too badly. You rise. As you reach the door, you glance back. Do you think you ask that anyone will ever wear them? He looks up, needle-paused midair. Oh, someone always does. The door closes behind you. The sun is higher now. The cobblestones warm underfoot. A woman sweeps petals from the steps of the apothecary. A child chases a cat with a ribbon too fine for a child to own. You walk away slowly, the scent of red velvet still following behind like perfume. You don't own the gloves, but tonight in this dream you touch them. And tomorrow maybe you'll return, even if just to see them, even if just to remember what beauty once meant. The fog clings to the river like an old song forgotten by morning. You're in London now, but not the London of engines and lamps. This is a city of creaking carts, hay-scented air, and shutters that swing with the wind. The year is 1463, and you're standing beside a cart of turnips pretending not to stare at a woman who has just been arrested for wearing a silk gown. Not just any silk, of course, that would be too easy. No, it's French silk, dyed in a blue so deep it seems to swallow light, stitched with subtle fleur-de-lis patterns that dance only when the sun hits them just right. The woman is crying, though her tears seem more from outrage than shame. Her name, you overhear, is Eleanor Cook, the wife of a cobbler who, by all accounts, has never left this side of the Thames. She says it was a gift, whispers a boy beside you chewing on a hunk of bread, from her cousin in Calais. Her cousin scoffs a man with a chimney sweep's hat. I've got a cousin in Calais, too, but I don't wear silk like a bleeding duchess. That earns a few chuckles, though one woman mutters, still it's lovely cloth. Shame to see it wasted. The constable doesn't care for debates. He's more interested in scribbling notes onto a warped wooden tablet, licking his pencil with the concentration of a monk. You watch as he measures the neckline too wide by half a finger, the sleeves gathered more than twice. He frowns at the embroidered cuffs. Foreign stitch, he mutters. Violation of the 1463 Act. You blink. There it is again, a law about stitches. England's sumptuary laws, especially in this century, were absurdly detailed. The 1463 statute explicitly stated who could wear what material and of what origin. Silk only for knights and up, velvet nobles only, gold cloth only royalty. But most confusing of all was this: a wife could not dress more richly than her husband's income allowed, even if she came from a wealthier family. "That's the part no one agrees on," says an old man next to you who seems to be reading your thoughts. Whether the silk itself is the crime or the status it pretends to give. Eleanor's gown flutters faintly in the wind, a ripple of rebellion. You notice that under it her shoes are patched. Her hands are work rough. She doesn't look like a duchess. She looks like someone who loved a color too much. A clergyman passes, gives her a once-over, and sighs theatrically. "Excess breeds rot," he says to no one in particular. "Rot tastes better than turnips," someone mutters back, possibly you. And then comes the odd moment. A dog, muddy, limping slightly, bounds into the scene and begins furiously chewing at the hem of Eleanor's silk gown. She shrieks. The constable drops his stylus. The boy with the bread chokes laughing. Even the clergyman bites back a smile. "It's French silk," someone calls out. Even the dogs are patriots. But what happens next is more curious. As Eleanor lifts the hem to free it from the dog's teeth, a slip of paper falls from the lining. The constable sees it, picks it up, reads it, then frowns. "Well," he says, "this complicates things." You edge closer. The paper is damp now, smudged, but you catch a glimpse of a name asterisk, Lady Margaret de Brixton. "The dress is not hers," the constable mutters. "She was altering it for delivery." A pause. Everyone leans forward slightly, as if the street itself is holding its breath. "She's a seamstress," the constable concludes, "not a wearer." Some groan, others nod. The clergyman harumphs with disappointment. "Still too nice for her," someone says, but the crowd is already thinning. Eleanor gathers what remains of her dignity and her skirt, though the dog is still trailing after her, wagging its tail as if expecting praise for patriotism. You follow her for a block. She doesn't notice. Her steps are fast, almost angry. Eventually, she rounds a corner and vanishes through a narrow door marked with a painted boot and needle. You stand there a while, thinking. That's the trouble with these laws. They weren't really about clothing. They were about who you're allowed to be seen as, who you're allowed to become. Later historians will debate the document Eleanor dropped. Some believe it proves she was innocent. Others claim it was a decoy, a clever ruse used by ambitious women who couldn't afford noble birth but could sew like the angels. In some accounts, Eleanor was later hired by Lady Margaret herself. In others, she disappears from history entirely. But tonight in this dream you saw her. You smelt the starch of the turnips, the soot of the chimneys, the faint perfume that clung to the gown despite its scuffle with the dog. You saw a moment where law and humanity nearly shook hands, nearly. You pass by a window, and in its warped glass you glimpse your own reflection dressed too finely for your station, a thread of blue across your collar, and for a moment you wonder if anyone else is watching you. Back then they always were, so you keep walking slow and careful as the fog begins to lift. The bells of the city echo in the distance, and the dog, now victorious, chases its own tail near the constable's boot. There's a hush over the courtyard, thick as incense, soft as the velvet on a bishop's cloak. You are in Avignon now, in the spring of 1311, when the city hums with cardinals and cooks, scribes, and shoemakers all swarming under the shadow of the papal palace. The cobblestones here feel warm under your feet, the sun heavy with the scent of time and old stone. You hear the bells of matins echo faintly, but you are not headed to prayer. No, you're watching a man carry a shoe. Not just any shoe. It's gilded, curled at the toe like a question mark, and polished so brightly that it reflects the morning light into the eyes of everyone unfortunate enough to walk behind it. The shoe is being escorted through the narrow passage behind Saint Martial's chapel in the hands of a valet wearing gloves because even touching it with bare skin would be too familiar. The bishop whose foot belongs to the shoe is nowhere in sight. Shoes don't walk themselves, someone mutters beside you. You glance over. An elderly nun, no taller than your shoulder, watches the procession of one with a look of utter disapproval. He wears them for meals, she says, not mass meals. You raise your eyebrows. Meals. Truffles and shoes, she sighs. One for the soul, one for the souls. You try not to laugh, but the truth is the joke isn't new. Avignon has been whispering about Bishop Raymond d'Auteuil for months now. His shoes embroidered with gold thread in the shape of vines were commissioned from a French artisan in Limoges. Supposedly they cost more than a monk's yearly stipend. He wears them only when seated, never standing, and always with a ring on every visible finger. Tonight he's not even in town, but the shoes are being aired. Aired? The valet stops, gently sets them down on a velvet cloth atop the chapel steps, and removes a feather brush from his satchel. It is magnificent and ridiculous, but here's where it gets complicated. Because according to the sumptuary decrees quietly pushed through the papal bureaucracy 2 years prior, no cleric, regardless of rank, was to wear shoes made of gold or silver thread, nor display more than 2 rings at once. This was meant to discourage vanity, encourage humility, and reduce the ever-growing mockery of the clergy's increasingly lavish wardrobes. And yet here the shoes are, polished, proud, perfect. The bishops wrote the laws, the nun beside you mutters, and then forgot to read them. And here comes the odd moment. As the valet finishes brushing the shoes, a small boy, barefoot grinning, runs up and places an apple beside them. Then he bows deeply the way one might to a saint's relic. The crowd chuckles, a few claps. The valet glares, though the boy has already vanished down a side alley. You step closer slowly, as if not to offend. You wonder just briefly what it would feel like to wear them, to place your foot inside that curling gold, to step down on stone and feel silk line your heel. You wouldn't walk far, of course, maybe just across the room. But everyone would asterisk your presence somehow, without a single word. Later that day you hear a debate in the apothecary's courtyard. A Franciscan, a Dominican, and a cook all discussing the matter of the shoe. The cook argues it's forgivable. He eats well, prays well, and dresses like an angel. Let the man have his slippers. The Dominican scoffs. Sumptuary laws exist for a reason. The Franciscan, ever gentle, merely shrugs. What feeds the ego leaves the soul hungry. You leave before they reach consensus. But you can't help but notice none of them wear shoes finer than patched leather, and all of them have the weary eyes of men who know they'll never walk paths lined with velvet. Later historians would note that the bishop was never fined, never censured. In fact, he went on to become an archbishop and had his shoes buried with him wrapped in silk and blessed as holy objects. There's even a surviving inventory of his wardrobe, though scholars argue about the dates. Some say the gold-threaded shoes appear too early to match the law's passage. Others believe the law was tailored around the bishop's habits, not the other way around. In dreams, however, logic fades. And in your dream you see him clearly, Bishop Raymond, sitting at a table too large for his frame, eating roast duck, while his feet in their golden armor never touch the ground. The valet brushes them once for good measure, then disappears behind the chapel again. You feel the breeze shift. Somewhere nearby a musician begins tuning a lute, and the notes flutter like birds across the stone plaza. You walk on, and for the rest of the morning you notice shoes. A cracked sole on a carpenter, a velvet slipper poking from beneath a merchant's cloak, a shoemaker's sign shaped like a curling toe. Every step someone takes is measured by law, by eyes, by whispered expectation. But you tonight walk shoeless through the memory of it all. No judgment, no weight, just the quiet sound of gold being polished at the edge of morning. The shutters creak open with a hesitant sigh as the morning fog rolls over the Seine like a gray velvet ribbon. You're in Paris now, October 1577, and the city hums with quiet rivalry. Not the loud kind with swords and banners, but the kind that lives in lace collars, veiled glances, and the number of pearls sewn into a bodice. You stand in the back row of a small courtroom, its windows misted over, and its benches crowded with citizens waiting for a spectacle. And today's spectacle is a trial, not for theft or blasphemy. No, it's for fashion. To your left sits a woman in a heavy velvet gown the color of overripe cherries with a lace collar so wide it casts a shadow over her shoulders like a parasol. Her gloves are goat leather stitched with tiny pink roses at the wrists. She is the Comtesse de Marigny, and she does not look pleased to be here. To your right, arms folded over her faded apron, is Madame Trudel, the cheese seller from Rue des Blancs-Manteaux, best known for her habit of offering unsolicited medical advice and for owning a cat with one eye and a limp. And in the middle of it all is Asterisk the dress. It hangs on a wooden mannequin in front of the magistrate. Pale gold brocade slightly frayed at the cuffs with sleeves slashed in the Spanish style and lined with crimson silk. It's beautiful. It's also apparently illegal for a merchant's wife to wear. The magistrate clears his throat. Madame Trudel, you are accused of violating the edict of 1574 concerning attire unbecoming of your station. How do you plead? Madame Trudel squints. I plead that I got it second-hand. The room chuckles. The Countess does not. She looked ridiculous, the Countess whispers loudly enough to carry, like a turnip wrapped in parchment. I look divine, Madame Trudel retorts, and my cheese sold out in an hour. A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Someone near you coughs, perhaps to hide a laugh. Here's where the law comes in. The Asterisk Edict of 1574 asterisk, signed reluctantly by King Henri III, was meant to restore moral order and curb extravagance among the rising merchant class. It banned gold brocade, foreign dyes, and anything that might confuse a cheese seller for a countess, or worse, a countess for a cheese seller. Historians still debate whether it was a religious gesture or a political strategy. Some say it was the church's idea, others say it came from the king's tailors who feared being undercut by enterprising artisans. Back in the courtroom, the magistrate leans forward. Madame, can you prove the dress was second-hand? I can prove it didn't smell new, she snaps. And I had to re-hem it because the previous owner was at least 2 bottles of wine taller than me. More laughter. The Countess scowls deeper. The dress was stolen, she declares. It belonged to my maid, who disappeared 3 months ago with 2 gowns and a bottle of imported perfume. Imported perfume, Madame Trudel repeats, eyes wide. How very modest of your maid. The magistrate sighs. Madame de Marigny, do you have proof the dress was yours? No, she says, but I no it. Is it labeled? Don't be absurd. Do you have a portrait wearing it? The Countess pauses. It was informal. I wore it to Mass, Madame Trudel adds helpfully. A hush falls. That's pushing it. Wearing contraband lace in the street is one thing, wearing it to Mass is practically fashion heresy. She ate cheese in it too, someone whispers behind you. You lean slightly toward the wall. The texture of the stone is cool and damp against your sleeve. From this corner of the room you can see how tired the magistrate looks. His wig is slightly askew, his inkwell is nearly dry, and he is perhaps beginning to wonder whether governing fabric is really worth the paper it's printed on. Here comes the odd moment. A young girl no older than 10 walks solemnly to the front of the room. No one seems to know who she is. She pulls something from a small linen bag, a crumpled piece of yellowed parchment, a tailor's bill, dated a year ago, signed by someone named Clémence de Marigny. The room holds its breath. Clémence, the magistrate, says slowly, would be your maid. The Countess goes pale. The girl curtsies and leaves without a word. Madame Trudel beams. That's her niece, she says. Bright girl, comes by for leftover rinds. The magistrate stares at the paper, then at the dress. Very well, he murmurs. The dress was not stolen, it was purchased. The Countess glares daggers. The cheese seller adjusts her bodice. But the magistrate adds quickly, Madame Trudel is still in violation of the edict, regardless of the garment's origin. There it is again. Possessing beauty is one crime. Wearing it out loud is another. He finds her 10 livres, not a fortune, but enough to make a point. Madame Trudel pays in coins, some of them damp with cheese brine, then turns to the Countess. Perhaps next time, my lady, she says sweetly, you'll donate to the poor. That way we can all look divine at Mass. She leaves the room to a mix of applause and scandalized gasps. You step into the street after her. The fog is cleared. The market smells of onions and early pears. You spot the one-eyed cat sitting on a barrel of salt. Later historians will argue about this case. Some claim it was the beginning of the end for sumptuary enforcement in Paris. Others believe it was staged a deliberate farce meant to soften public resistance to the law. There's even a footnote in one memoir that claims Madame Trudel later sold replica versions of the dress to local merchants. In blue, with slightly more modest collars. Tonight, none of that matters. Tonight you stood in a room where velvet became weaponry and a woman defended her dignity with cheese lace and wit. You walk on the air sharp with early autumn, and for a moment you think about how clothing isn't just what we wear but how we're seen. You glance down at your own sleeves and wonder who you'd be if they were trimmed in gold. You're walking now through the high mountain air of the Swiss Alps. The wind tastes of smoke and crushed pine needles, and your boots crunch over frost-glazed stones. It's 1432, and the village of Altenstein, clinging to the edge of a narrow gorge, seems more like a whisper than a place barely 30 families, 2 goats per roof, and a chapel with a crooked bell that rings whether you want it to or not. It is quiet, too quiet. The type of silence that only comes after something has been taken away. You reach the village square such as it is, a half-frozen fountain with a rusting iron ladle, a bench warped from a century of snow, a weaving frame abandoned under a tarp. And that's where you see it, a bolt of cloth draped limply like a ghost, pale linen dyed in a soft cornflower blue. It's beautiful. It's also illegal. You don't have to be told that. You can feel it, the way the breeze passes over it like an accusation, the way the villagers glance away whenever they notice you looking. The linen doesn't belong to anyone anymore, but it once belonged to everyone. And that's what ended them. You meet her by the chapel, Greta Baumgartner, elderly, wide-shouldered, with fingers that never stopped twisting the hem of her wool coat. She tells you without being asked that her brother used to dye the linen in secret. Not for money, not for vanity. Just so the girls had something to wear to the harvest dances, she says, so they didn't look like ghosts in the moonlight. You sit with her on a bench warmed by the morning sun. Then one year, she continues, he made too much, and the taxman saw it. Here's what happened. In 1432, a regional edict was passed in several parts of the Holy Roman Empire, outlawing the use of imported dyes for common fabrics. These dyes, especially the brighter blues and reds, were reserved for nobility and city elites. The argument was framed around morality, of course, modesty, order, But those in Altenstein knew the truth. The city guilds had lobbied for it. Too many rural weavers, Greta says, spitting into the dirt. They couldn't stand it. You glance toward the loom again. So what did they do? The guild fined us, confiscated all the bolts, shut down the dye pits, sent a magistrate to ensure compliance. He arrived in a red cloak lined with fox fur. She laughs bitterly. Imagine that. The punishment wasn't violent. It was worse. It was bureaucratic. The village lost its only source of income. No one would buy undyed linen anymore, not with the city shops glimmering in colors. They were told to return to wool and hemp, the acceptable fabrics for their class. But their buyers disappeared, their skills suddenly suspect. And slowly, one by one, the families left, or starved, or simply stopped weaving. Greta stayed. I still dye, she says, not for selling, just for memory. She opens the chapel door. Inside, hanging on a rough peg behind the altar, is a robe the color of deep morning sky. The stitching is clumsy, the dye uneven. But it is beautiful. Here comes the odd moment. You hear a whisper behind you. Turn. A child no older than 6 sits in the front pew, carefully brushing her fingers along the robe's hem. She hums to herself a tune so faint it might be the bell again. She's my granddaughter, Greta says, smiling softly. She's never seen the village full, but she dreams of it sometimes. She told me last week that she had a dream where everyone came back and the whole valley shimmered with blue. You step outside again. There's a cold bite to the air now, a storm creeping down from the ridgeline. You wrap your arms around yourself. The thought of being fined for color sits strangely on your chest. It sounds absurd until you realize what the village lost wasn't just linen, it was pride, place, a sense of being seen. Historians still debate the edict's true aim. Some argue it was economic warfare. Others say it was spiritual, a push to suppress worldly appearance in rural regions considered too pagan, too wild. A few radical scholars even suggest it was personal, that one city lord's mistress was seen wearing Altenstein blue at a festival and was mistaken for someone far above her station. You can never quite prove that kind of thing, but the villagers believed it. You hear the bell again, once, then silence. In the distance, the wind picks up a corner of the linen left on the loom. It flutters once, then settles like a sigh. You walk on. By the time you leave the village behind, your feet are sore and the mountain path feels steeper, but the color stays in your mind, that impossible blue, not rich enough to be royal, not humble enough to be peasant, something in between, something that didn't quite survive the rules. And somewhere, perhaps tonight, perhaps only in this dream, a loom is still creaking in the dark, working in secret, threading memory into cloth. The scent is the first thing you notice, warm yeast-toasted flour, the faintest touch of cardamom. It wraps around you like a wool blanket on a winter morning. You're in Bruges now, in the Low Countries, around the year 1521, before dawn has even fully stretched across the sky. The stars are fading, but the lamps are still lit, and in this small street near the Minnewater Canal, the ovens are already glowing. You duck through the low doorway of a baker's shop, your breath fogging in the air. There are 4 women at work, one shaping dough, one tending to the fire, one brushing loaves with milk, and the 4th, just for a moment, is standing still, because she is staring into the mirror. Not a large mirror nor an ornate one, just a small hand mirror hung from a nail beside the spice rack. And what she's looking at is not her face. It's her collar. Lace. Delicate, intricate, clearly handmade. It trembles slightly as she breathes. She tucks it quickly beneath the edge of her apron when she hears you step in. "Early for bread," says the eldest without looking up. Her voice has the crackle of someone who speaks mostly to ovens. You smile, bow your head, and move closer to the warmth. The fire smells like cherry wood. She made it herself, the old woman adds, nodding toward the girl with the lace. Stayed up 3 nights twisting threads while the rest of us slept. The girl flushes red. It's not for show. No, the older woman says. You planning to eat it then? Everyone chuckles, even the girl. You sit near the hearth, the bricks radiating a sleepy comfort. One of the women offers you a crusty heel of bread. You take it, chew slowly, the outside crisp, the inside warm enough to make you close your eyes. That's when you hear it, the bell. Dull metallic, far off, but growing louder. She hears it too. The lace disappears completely under the apron. Because the bell means the inspector is coming. Here's what you know. In Bruges, as in much of Burgundy and Flanders during the early 16th century, there were strict regulations on lace. Certain patterns known as noble twists were reserved exclusively for the upper classes. The production of these was not illegal, but wearing them was unless you had the proper status, even if you made it yourself, even if you only wore it under an apron beside an oven where no one would see. Especially then. The inspector enters. Tall, angular, more mustache than man. His boots echo on the floor like accusations. Any new threads, he asks, casually, already glancing around the shop. No, monsieur, says the eldest. Same dose, same hands. Same rules, he says, stepping closer to the fire. No lace collars, I trust. No silver threads. She shakes her head. You know our flour barely pays for salt. He hums, walks slowly past each woman. His eyes linger a beat too long on the girl, her shoulders tense. You watch closely. He doesn't see it. Or maybe he does and chooses not to mention it. Instead, he walks to the counter and picks up a sweet roll. Your almond paste is getting better, he says. Tell your father. Dead 3 years now, the eldest replies. He grunts, tosses a coin onto the counter, then leaves. No words about lace, no fine, just footsteps and then nothing. They wait in silence. 1 breath, 2. Then the girl laughs, high, nervous, almost tearful. I thought I was going to faint, she says, pulling the collar back out again. You will, the eldest replies dryly, if you wear that fool thing in daylight. But it's not illegal unless someone complains, the girl says. Isn't that what the edict said? The law doesn't care if they complain, the old woman mutters. It cares if you get caught. Historians have debated these sumptuary edicts for centuries. Some records insist the lace restrictions were economic, meant to protect the industry by keeping it exclusive. Others argue it was social control, a way to prevent the growing merchant class from appearing too powerful. After all, if a baker's daughter looked as fine as a duke's niece, how would anyone know who to bow to? And then there's the strangest theory that certain lace patterns were coded messages, that threads could be twisted to signify political allegiance, romantic scandal, or even religious protest. That's never been proven, of course. But the idea that lace could be dangerous, that much is easy to believe. Here comes the odd moment. The girl offers the collar to you just for a second to hold. You hesitate, but only for a second. It's lighter than you expect. The threads so fine they seem to shimmer even without light. You run a finger across the edge and feel the ghost of the hours it took to make. The patience, the hope, the risk. You should keep it hidden, you say. She shrugs, but it's so beautiful. Outside, the sky is beginning to brighten, a gray-pink blush over the red rooftops. The women return to their baking. The oven crackles. The scent of rising dough fills your lungs again, steadying you. You step outside just as the first customers begin to line up. You notice a woman in a shawl with embroidered edges, another in a cloak fastened with a clasp that's just a bit too fine. The line between legal and lovely is as ever blurred with flower. Tonight in this dream you touched a piece of lace that history never wrote down, not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't supposed to exist. And yet it did, perhaps still does, tucked into the folds of a flower-stained apron waiting to be worn again. It is raining softly when you arrive in Genoa, the kind of rain that doesn't fall but asterisk waits asterisk in the air on the window panes in the folds of your cloak. The sky is the color of pewter, and every rooftop glistens as if freshly painted. It's 1498, and the port city wakes reluctantly as if unsure whether it should face the sea or crawl back into bed. You, of course, are already up, because today you've come to the office of Signore Luca Belanti, scribe bureaucrat, and the man in charge of the city's most ridiculous job. He is counting buttons. The chamber is dark and smells of moldy paper and candle wax. Shelves sag under ledgers filled with fines and inventories. Rain drums gently on the shutters. A cat sleeps on a pile of folded tunics near the hearth. Belanti does not look up when you enter. Close the door, he mutters. The moths are unionizing. You do as he says and step into the lamplight. He's hunched over a velvet doublet stretched flat on the table, his fingers carefully hovering over a row of decorative brass buttons. 14, 15, he whispers, then sighs. 15. You wait. He dips his quill into ink and scratches something into the book beside him. Too many, you ask? For a merchant's son, absolutely. He blots the page. Regulation says 12 per outer garment, 14 for nobility. Anything above that and the garment must either be altered, destroyed, or confiscated. You glance around at the confiscated pile. It's impressively colorful. Why buttons, you ask? Because we can count them. There it is, the strange logic of sumptuary law. For all the complicated rules, what fabrics, what colors, what patterns, buttons offered something measurable. And Genoa, always a city of accountants, latched onto that like a barnacle to a hull. The trouble is, Belanti continues, nobody agrees what counts asterisk as asterisk a button. Is it a clasp, a toggle, a bead? Is a pearl sewn at the collar a fastening or a flourish? You glance at the cat. What does asterisk-y asterisk think? Belanti waves a hand. He thinks everyone should wear nothing and sleep all day. He stands, stretches, and walks to a cabinet labeled asterisk ambiguous fastenings. He opens a drawer and pulls out a sash covered in silver loops. Is this decorative or criminal, he asks, holding it up. You try to imagine it. Depends who's wearing it. Exactly, he tosses it back in. Here comes the odd moment. A young man bursts into the room, soaked through, holding a tunic above his head like a shield. I protest this fine, he cries. Belanti doesn't flinch. Nay. Fabio Conti. Belanti flips through a ledger. Merchant class, father sells almonds, 12-button maximum. That tunic has asterisk 12 asterisk, I counted myself. Belanti sighs. It has 13. No, the top loop doesn't count. It's ceremonial. Ceremonial. For feast days. You wore it on asterisk, Tuesday asterisk. Fabio groans, dripping onto the floor. It's not fair. Buttons are fashion. Fashion is expression. You're criminalizing feelings. Belanti raises a brow. Your feelings have brass shanks and were imported from Venice. They glare at each other. Then Fabio quite suddenly takes off the tunic and throws it on the desk. Fine, count them again. Belanti does, slowly, carefully. Still 13, he says, unless you count this one as a clasp. It asterisk is asterisk a clasp, Fabio insists. It loops, it doesn't fasten. Belanti shrugs. You can appeal to the button tribunal. There's a tribunal. Belanti opens a drawer, pulls out a stamped form. Costs 2 florins and takes 6 weeks. Or you can just remove a button now and be done with it. Fabio groans louder than the shutters in the storm. You watch fascinated as he fishes a small knife from his belt, cuts the top button, and hurls it into the hearth. Happy, he says. The cat opens one eye. blinks, goes back to sleep. "You're legal now," Belanti says mildly. "Enjoy your Tuesday." Fabio stomps out, leaving wet footprints and a puddle of dignity behind. Belanti turns back to you. "This is what I do all day. This, buttons, wet shoes, outrage, paperwork." "Why do they follow the rules at all, you ask?" He shrugs. "Some don't. Most try. And then some poor fool has to decide which thread made them a criminal." Historians today argue over the sumptuary button laws of Genoa. Some claim they were effective tools to slow down the rise of merchant wealth, limiting how visibly the non-noble classes could flaunt their success. Others argue they were unenforceable nonsense, largely symbolic, often mocked. One scholar noted dryly that more pages exist recording asterisk disputes asterisk over button counts than actual garment designs from the period. But there's another theory, that the law wasn't really about buttons. It was about tension, about how close everyone was to each other's status. Nobles marrying merchant daughters, apprentices dressing like lords, seamstresses designing gowns finer than queens could afford. And so the button became a boundary, a countable illusion of control. Belanti returns to his desk, picks up the next tunic, and starts again. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the rain has turned to mist. You step back into it slowly, your own coat buttoned right to the neck. You glance down. 12. Just 12. You walk on quietly, amused, knowing that if you had worn 13, your entire day might have gone very differently. Because in Genoa, sometimes the difference between freedom and a fine is just one button too many. The sky is wide and cloudless as you enter the monastery walls. Not a bird, not a breeze, not even a whisper of wind moves in this dry September morning. You're in the hills of Umbria in the year 1259, and the stones beneath your feet are still warm from the night before. Everything smells of rosemary, dry parchment, and beeswax. The monks here speak little, eat less, and dress in coarse brown wool robes, itchy heavy, and approved by both papal law and local tradition. Simplicity is the rule, humility the virtue. So you're understandably surprised when you see him Brother Salvestro, strolling through the cloister, watering basil, humming what sounds suspiciously like a love song in Latin, and wearing purple ... Not royal purple, not the Tyrian shade reserved for emperors. No, this is a faded, almost lavender wool robe that flutters as he walks, catching the light like a sigh. But it's not brown, and that is the problem. You watch from the shadow of the courtyard arch as two younger monks whisper about him in hushed tones. "He says it was an accident," one mutters. "How do you accidentally dye an entire robe purple?" the other hisses. He claims it was mulberries. Liar, mulberries stain, they don't shimmer. Here's the story you gather over the next few days. Salvestro had indeed been tasked with dyeing a batch of new robes for the novices. Traditionally, they would be boiled in walnut husks, producing that iconic earth-brown tone. But Salvestro, ever the experimental gardener, had harvested an entire basket of what he thought were black fruit pods growing behind the chapel. They weren't black, says the cook. They were indigo pods, imported, forbidden. The resulting robe came out wrong, beautifully, gloriously, peacefully wrong. And instead of discarding it, Salvestro wore it. Why? Because, as he later told the abbot, it looked like a sunrise in silence. And I thought maybe God would not mind. The abbot did mind, and so did the bishop. And now the monastery awaits a judgment from Rome on whether Salvestro is guilty of violating ecclesiastical sumptuary law. Yes, even monks had sumptuary laws, ... You find this hard to believe, but it's true. Church councils throughout the 13th century repeatedly issued rules about clerical attire. No precious metals, No colored robes, no embellishments, no soft fabrics, only wool, only earth tones. And yet disputes kept arising over sandals too finely cut, belts too delicately braided, and now a robe too lavender. The odd moment comes during Compline, the evening prayer. You sit at the back of the chapel, listening to the plain chant echo like breath through stone. Then you see him, Salvestro, kneeling just ahead of you, not in purple this time, but in a robe so aggressively brown it looks like it was dyed in burnt toast. Still at his sleeve, something glimmers faintly. You lean forward, a tiny strip of thread. Purple, unpicked, forgotten, or maybe not. After the prayers, you catch him in the garden. Why keep the thread, you ask? He shrugs, tending to a row of mint. Because it made me pray better, he says. When I wore that color, I felt like a crocus after rain. You laugh before you mean to. That's not very doctrinal, you say. He smiles. Neither are most of my prayers. Later that week, a letter arrives from Rome. It is long, overly formal, painfully vague. It says essentially that while Brother Salvestro's robe was *inappropriate*, it was not *intentionally sinful. He is to cease wearing it and destroy any remaining purple fabric. No further punishment will follow. The robe, we're told, is burned, or at least most of it. Historians argue about this case endlessly. Some say Salvestro was simply eccentric. Others argue he was making a quiet protest, a monastic resistance to legalistic rigidity. Some claim the robe asterisk was Tyrian purple smuggled through Venice, and that Salvestro was part of a secret order promoting divine aesthetics. A few even believe he never existed. But in the monastery's garden, records carefully kept through war, famine, and reform, you can still find his name. Brother Salvestro, 1254-1278, keeper of Basil, lector of Psalms. One incident of improper dyeing. You leave the monastery quietly. The wind has returned. It rustles the rosemary. The bells toll nones. And in the distance behind the drying laundry, you spot a patch of lavender growing wild. You stop, pick one stem, hold it to your nose. The smell is faint, but lovely. You walk on, and for the rest of your dream, everything feels just slightly more colorful. As if holiness once in a while wears the wrong robe and smiles. The air is thick with roasted meats, pipe smoke, and the perfume of too many strangers packed too tightly beneath a canvas roof. You're in Nuremberg, 1541, wandering through the autumn fair where cloth merchants shout over blacksmiths, jugglers compete with tax collectors, and fortune-tellers keep a running tally of who's already paid twice. You drift between stalls, your hands brushing tapestries, furs, cheap trinkets, and fabrics imported from as far as Constantinople. You pass a woman selling gooseberry wine, a monk with a stack of indulgences that look suspiciously unblessed, and a child dressed in what appears to be a tablecloth. All is noise, motion, and color. And then you see him, leaning against a wagon painted with faded stars, boot heel pressed casually to the wood, arms crossed beneath a cloak just a bit too fine. He is tall, narrow, wearing leather gloves with silver thread embroidered in spirals, and most dangerously boots made of Spanish calf skin dyed black. Deep black. The kind that gleams like oil and marks you instantly as someone with foreign tastes and questionable loyalties. You stop, because in 1541 those boots are a statement. And in some parts of Germany, especially during the delicate balance of Reformation politics, they are considered enough to make you a suspect. He sees you watching, winks. The sign above the wagon reads Master Arno, storyteller and illusionist. Of course he is. Later, at the edge of the fair, you hear voices. 2 city guards muttering in low German, arguing about whether to report him. It's the boots, one says. Boots don't make spies. He's not local. Neither's my wife. Should I arrest her too? You learn the rest from a tailor's apprentice who shares your bench at the sausage stall. That Arno fellow, he says, was reported last year in Augsburg for wearing satin-lined gloves in August. Is that illegal, you ask? He shrugs. Technically, no. But it made the mayor's cousin nervous. And here it is again, fashion as a threat. In Nuremberg, the city council had passed a series of sumptuary laws to curb excess, and they claimed protect the moral fabric of society. But the deeper truth was more complicated. Post-Reformation Germany was a stew of nervous alliances, religious suspicion, and constant accusations of espionage. To look *2, Catholic * or *2 foreign * could earn you a file in someone's drawer. And Master Arno, with his black boots and silver-threaded gloves, fit no one's idea of modesty or clarity. You see the odd moment late in the afternoon. Arno has drawn a crowd. He's telling a story, a tale of a shoemaker who crafts a pair of boots so beautiful that kings weep and priests confess their sins. As he speaks, he walks in a slow circle voice, rising and falling like a wind stirring leaves. And then, without breaking rhythm, he removes one boot. Just one. He holds it up. Here it is, he says, the shoe that turned a man into a ghost. The crowd laughs uneasily. Some clap. One woman spits. He puts the boot down, steps into it again. But not before you see what's hidden inside. A folded letter tucked neatly into the lining. When the crowd disperses, the guards approach him. Your name, one demands. Master Arno. Real name. Is that what you want, or the one I was born with? Are you registered? I'm performing, not selling. You're foreign. Aren't we all, he says softly. There is a pause. Then the shorter guard nods. Lose the gloves and clean the boots. You're making the nobles nervous. Arno bows, as you wish. That night, over a mug of watered wine and a bench near the fire pit, he sits beside you. Why the letter, you ask? Prop, he says. You wait. He grins. Or maybe I'm delivering a message to someone who won't accept letters, only legends. You study his face. It gives away nothing, just a glint of humor and a shadow of something heavier. Historians today still argue about these wandering performers, especially those with peculiar garments and secret compartments. Some believe they were hired couriers passing information through fashion codes. Others say it's nonsense paranoia spun into academia. There's even one theory that black boots became illegal in several towns not because of spies, but because a notorious thief wore them during every robbery, and it became a kind of dark signature. But there's no record of Arno after 1543. Just a ledger note in Nuremberg *1 performer. No charges, advised to blend better. *. As you rise to leave, Arno touches your sleeve. Next time, he says, wear green, it makes you invisible. You nod. To who? To people looking for purple, he says. Then he vanishes into the smoke. You walk slowly through the cooling night. The fair is shutting down. Torches flicker. Cloth is folded. Boots, ordinary ones, leave muddy prints on packed dirt. And somewhere, perhaps, someone reads a letter hidden in a glove, in a boot, in a story. In a world where clothing could mean espionage, or just very bad timing. You're underground now, or at least it feels like it. The walls are thick with soot, the ceiling low, and the scent of damp wool mixes with beer and old garlic. You're in Bologna, 1371, inside a tavern that no respectable citizen would admit to knowing. But this is where the tailors meet. And tonight, they are planning a rebellion. Not with swords. With *thread. You sit in the corner, a chipped mug of wine in your hand, and watch as the room fills with men and a few women whose hands bear the marks of needles and shears. Their thumbs are calloused, their fingertips nicked. Some wear plain clothes. Others wear their defiance, proudly hidden silk linings, forbidden lace cuffs or buttons carved from ivory and dyed the color of blood. At the center of it all stands Master Tommaso di Castello. Short, bald, eyes sharp as awls, he slams a spool of gold thread onto the table. This, he says, was banned yesterday. There's a rumble of protest. I bought it legally, he continues, but because the son of a spice merchant wore a tunic with gold piping to church, the Signoria declared it unfit for artisans. Again. The room murmurs anger, disbelief, weary agreement. It's always the same, says a woman near you, adjusting her thimble. They see one stitch out of place and suddenly it's treason. Another man grumbles, the laws change faster than the fashions. Here's what you know, Bologna had one of the most intricate sumptuary systems in 14th century Italy. Tailors, despite being the creators of beauty, were legally forbidden from *wearing *, or even *owning *, the very things they made. Some couldn't display their own work. Others couldn't walk in public with fabrics considered noble. And if they accidentally dress too finely, fines. Public shame. Sometimes exile. But we make the city look rich, Tommaso says now. They steal our skill and then arrest us for using it. Someone raises a mug. To hypocrisy. To thread, someone else adds. They drink. Here comes the odd moment. Tommaso lifts a long roll of cloth from under the table, unrolls it slowly. A robe, magnificent, crimson velvet, trimmed in silver leaf, covered in embroidered lions and olive branches, symbols drawn from Bologna's own banners. I stitched it for account, he says. He died before he could wear it. Now I say we all wear it. Silence. One of the older tailors, a man missing 3 fingers, mutters, "That's suicide." "It's honesty," Tommaso replies. "One night, we march the Piazza Maggiore. We show them who makes their beauty." Laughter, nervous, then real. "What if we get arrested?" someone asks. "Then they'll have to mend their own sleeves," shouts a young apprentice. More laughter. Historians debate whether the so-called velvet march of 1371 ever actually happened. There are no official records of an organized tailor rebellion, no fines listed, no trials. But in the private journal of one minor notary there's a single sentence. Saw men in velvet, many not nobles. At dusk, no guards moved. Was it symbolic? Did the guards look away because they too wore coats stitched by these same hands? Or did it never happen at all, and the robe was simply burned, another dream scorched into ash before it could breathe? You never find out tonight, because Tommaso sees you watching, lifts the robe and places it into your hands. "Try it," he says. You hesitate. It's heavy, warm. The velvet clings like memory. As you slip it over your shoulders, the entire room falls quiet. You look down, your hands vanish into the silver embroidery. You feel taller, braver, seen. They raise their mugs again. To the tailors, to the thieves of elegance, to the rebels of cloth. That night in the dim back room of a tavern that smells like old cabbage and broken promises, you wear a garment no law says you're allowed to touch. And no one stops you. Outside, the city sleeps under a velvet sky. And beneath it, the ones who shaped its glory are still stitching in the dark, every seam a secret, every thread a rebellion no law can truly contain. You arrive as the bells are ringing, not just once, but in a jubilant, tumbling rhythm, each chime echoing off the terracotta rooftops of Siena. It's 1454, and you're here for a wedding. Not yours, of course, but someone important. Someone very important. You follow the procession through narrow stone alleys toward the central piazza. Rose petals scatter under your feet, crushed into fragrant pink smears. Trumpets sound in short bursts. Musicians in velvet doublets march in pairs. Children run ahead in silk tunics that shimmer blue, red, and gold, and every few steps a woman appears in a gown more outrageous than the last. You blink. Is that pearls sewn into her veil? Another woman passes her skirt so wide it brushes both walls of the alley at once. The hem appears to be asterisk woven with gold thread. You hear someone gasp, then laugh, then clap. The city has gone mad, and you realize quite suddenly that asterisk everyone asterisk here is breaking the law. You arrive at the square where benches overflow with Sienese nobility, the merchant class, even a few Florentines pretending they belong. The bride has not yet appeared, but whispers say she is wearing a Spanish mantilla, with emeralds, real ones, stitched into the lace like dewdrops. Sumptuary law, a man scoffs beside you, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief embroidered so finely you can barely see the threads. Today the law is blind. It's getting married, too. The couple Luca di Monteverde and Allegra di Spinoza are both heirs to banking fortunes raised in homes where modesty was spoken of only during confession and never practiced. Their families despised each other for 3 generations, but money has a way of softening grudges. The marriage was brokered with more contracts than affection. But the clothes are asterisk love letters. They begin to arrive. The groom first dressed in velvet so black it seems to swallow light. His tunic is edged with crimson silk and fastened with mother-of-pearl buttons. A jeweled sword, purely decorative, hangs at his side. Then Allegra. You stop breathing. She moves like a shadow made of sunlight. Her gown cream silk imported from Venice flows behind her like a second heartbeat. Pearls drip from her sleeves, her collar, even her shoes. And yes, the mantilla is there. Lace so fine it looks like spider silk holding actual emeralds in its net. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Some cheer, some frown. She can't, someone whispers. She did, someone else replies. Here's the thing. The Sienese asterisk sumptuary. Decree of 1449 explicitly forbade unmarried women from wearing precious stones. Married women could wear 2 if modestly displayed. Lace imported from Spain was taxed so heavily that even nobles avoided it, and mantillas technically not illegal, but considered inflammatory. The church had issued statements. Bishops had tisked, but Allegra walks like the law was written by her maid, and no one stops her. At the altar, the bishop blesses them. His robe is plain, his voice careful. He does not mention the gown, or the emeralds, or the lace that quite frankly glows in the sunlight. Here comes the odd moment. Just before the vows, a man stands up in the 3rd row. You recognize him. Inspector Roberto Alviani, tall, rigid, notorious for finding a baker's daughter 5 florins for a too shiny hair comb. He reaches into his robe, pulls out a parchment. Someone gasps, but instead of reading an accusation, he begins to sing. A song, a blessing, ancient musical, absurdly romantic. The entire crowd exhales. Later, someone will say that Alviani was Allegra's cousin. Others insist he was bribed. One merchant claims he saw the inspector earlier that morning crying over a poem. Historians don't agree. Some say this wedding marked the beginning of the end for Siena's sumptuary enforcement. Others argue it was a fluke, a single moment of civic indulgence too beautiful to repeat. But the wedding goes on. The feast afterward is even more decadent. Silver platters reflect candlelight. A roast swan arrives wearing a tiny golden crown. A violinist plays a melody so haunting that you swear the wine tastes sweeter when he does. And everywhere fabric, dresses made of dyed velvet in colors banned for anyone below a marquis. Men in tunics with gemstone buttons. gloves scented with ambergris. Even the servants look like nobility. Where did they get it all, you ask someone. He grins. They've been sewing in secret for years, storing it in trunks, waiting for the day they could wear it all at once. But why? Because he says tearing a piece of honeyed pastry in half, no one wants to be the only one following the rules. And there it is. The great paradox of sumptuary law. The more you tell people who they are not allowed to be the more they dream of becoming exactly that. Tonight Siena dreams in silk. You walk out of the square long after the music fades. The moon hangs low, casting silver shadows on stone. A pearl rolls across the cobblestones near your foot. You pick it up, tuck it into your pocket. No one will miss it. There were hundreds. And maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to be sewn back onto anything. Just carried, quietly, as proof, that once for a single golden evening everyone in Siena dressed exactly as they pleased. The sky was blue when the festival began. That soft, painterly blue you only get in Tuscany after a week of clean wind and promises of peace. But now, hours later, the clouds are swelling dark above the cypress trees, and what was once a garden of elegance has turned into a slow-sinking mess. You're in Lucca, 1486, walking among the remnants of a noble spring fete that was meant to celebrate the alliance of two merchant houses, meant to showcase taste restraint and the perfect harmony of wealth and virtue. But what it showcased instead was mud. Deep, sticky, ruinous mud. You step carefully across the trampled lawn. What was once velvet is now sludge. Gowns trail behind their wearers like wet banners of surrender. Satin shoes have been abandoned under hedges. One woman near the orchard clings to a grape trellis like a mast in a shipwreck, her golden slippers squelching with every move. And right there in the middle of the garden, face down in a patch of ruined rose bushes, lies a doublet that could pay off a bishop's debt. Gold thread. Fine stitching. Pearl buttons. Ruined. You're not the only one staring. Several servants gather at the edge of the garden trying to figure out if it's salvageable. Do we retrieve it, one asks. Not unless you want to explain how we got a boot print in the Virgin Mary's embroidery, the other replies. The fete had started beautifully, of course. Lutes played. Peacocks strutted. Platters of almond cake and citrus jelly dazzled under white awnings. Everyone came dressed at the very edge of the law. Not quite illegal, not quite permitted. A woman in a rust-colored gown had worn a train that extended 6 full paces behind her, well beyond the 4-pace maximum for her station. But she had cleverly stitched it with the family's initials in Latin, claiming it was not for show, but for asterisk commemoration. Asterisk. One nobleman arrived in a tunic so embroidered it resembled a tapestry. Subtle, someone whispered. He thinks wearing Latin quotes makes him look educated, someone else replied. It just makes him look itchy. But no one said anything, because everyone was doing it. And then came the rain. The clouds rolled in without warning. A wind picked up. Someone screamed not at the storm, but at the sound of their silk tearing on a hedge. Within moments, lace sagged, feathers drooped, painted shoes dissolved into shapeless globs. It was like watching status unravel in real time. Here comes the odd moment. A small boy, no older than 10, runs through the crowd, barefoot, grinning. He skids in the mudslides to a stop and triumphantly lifts the ruined doublet above his head. "I found treasure," he cries. People gasp, laugh. One older woman shrieks, "That's the Count of Martellini's." Was someone corrects her? The Count himself appears seconds later, red-faced, shoeless, clutching what remains of a velvet cloak now resembling wet firewood. "Give that here," he growls. The boy pauses, cocks his head. "You're sure it's yours?" Gasps again, some snorts. The Count snatches it back and storms off, but the moment hangs in the air. because in the mud everyone looks the same. A servant in burlap walks beside a duchess with a ruined coiffure. A merchant's wife helps a noble woman with a torn hem. A cook offers wine to a banker soaked to the bone. No one cares what anyone is wearing now, just whether it'll dry. Historians rarely write about the rain-soaked fates, too embarrassing, too hard to quantify. But diaries and letters tell us stories of fashion disasters like this one, where the sumptuary rules were followed, bent or broken, and then made meaningless by the weather. One Florentine scholar later wrote, "The heavens laugh at our hems, *." Some modern scholars argue that such disasters helped loosen the grip of sumptuary regulation. When the wealthiest families were publicly humiliated not by laws but by rain, the absurdity of spending fortunes on forbidden beauty became harder to ignore. Others say it changed nothing, that the laws returned stronger the next year, with new clauses about waterproofing. You find a bench near the ruined hedge maze and sit. The mud is everywhere now, caked on jewels, splattered on tapestries. One man tries to use a goose-feather fan to clean his boots. It breaks in two. You watch him stare at it for a full minute before handing both halves to a passing servant. You close your eyes. The music has stopped, the clouds still loom, but you feel strangely calm, because for once no one is pretending. Not to be richer or purer or nobler. They're just wet and tired, and for the first time all day *equal. You rise slowly, begin to walk again. Your feet squelch in the same mud as the rest. Your cloak hangs heavy at your shoulders. And yet you smile, because gold thread may glimmer under candlelight. But it doesn't float. It's quieter than you expected in the Great Hall of Westminster. The torches burn low, their smoke curling like questions into the vaulted stone ceiling. You're standing near the back of the chamber beside a tapestry that smells of damp wool and forgotten arguments, watching a king declare war not on France, not on Scotland, not even on Parliament, but on fashion. It's 1363 and Edward III is furious. The scroll in his hand shakes as he reads aloud. His voice is aged but sharp seasoned by decades of ruling and repeated disappointments. You hear the words as they fall, weighted like iron decency, modesty, the corruption of the commoner's eye, the sin of appearing too noble. He slams the scroll onto the table. Too many men walk the streets as if they were born from my own blood, he says, in velvet, in brocade, in cloth cut so fine it could clothe angels. You glance at the courtiers standing to his left. Most of them are quite obviously dressed in velvet, brocade, cloth fine enough to shame angels. One coughs discreetly into a sleeve embroidered with silver falcons. The irony is almost overwhelming. But Edward continues. He's issuing what would become one of the most comprehensive and draconian sumptuary laws in English history. A series of mandates declaring in meticulous detail what each social class may and may not wear. Cloth of gold, nobles only. Fur of ermine. Only if your family held land before the conquest. Silk, perhaps, but only if it's English. No more foreign nonsense. The law is meant to restore order, reinforce hierarchy, and discourage envy among the lower classes. But as you watch Edward pace behind the council table, a thought occurs to you. He likes finery, maybe too much. In fact, most of his portraits commissioned at great expense show him in garments so elaborate they'd violate his own law today. Gold-stitched surcoats, bejeweled collars, crowns that look like pastry gone mad. You overhear a nobleman whisper behind you, he wants the poor to look poor so he doesn't have to compete with their tailors. And here comes the odd moment. A page boy runs in breathless hair askew, clutching a small parcel. "It's arrived, Your Grace," he says, kneeling. Edward takes it, unwraps it. A cloak. Dark blue, rich velvet, trimmed with fur. Everyone leans in slightly. He holds it up, admiring the stitching. "Made from cloth declared illegal in my own decree," he says quietly. A pause. Then he folds it gently, places it aside. "I will not wear it," he says. The silence is so deep you can hear a candle crackle. "But I will not burn it either." He sits. That evening the court disperses slowly. Whispers follow you out like a draft through the stone corridors. You pass a seamstress standing in the hallway, arms full of rejected garments. She looks exhausted. "They always blame the cloth," she mutters. "Never the body it dresses." Outside, the fog rolls in off the Thames. You can still hear the echo of Edward's voice. Historians remain conflicted about this law. Some insist it was a sincere attempt to quell social unrest. After all, the Black Death had scrambled England's economy, leaving peasants with higher wages and dangerous ambitions. Others argue it was all theater. Edward, they say, knew the law wouldn't be followed, knew it couldn't be. It was a gesture, a symbol, a stitch in the illusion of order. There's even a school of thought, fringe but persistent, that Edward secretly commissioned forbidden garments even after the law passed, using aliases and shadow tailors to indulge his taste while remaining officially modest. No evidence supports that, but the absence of evidence in royal wardrobes is, often the point. You walk past a market stall as it closes for the night. A girl sweeps cloth scraps into a basket. You catch a glimpse of something, a tiny ribbon of gold-threaded silk. She sees you looking, winks. "Off limits," she says. "But who's looking at ribbons?" You smile, walk on. "Because in a country where the king wears nothing new, officially, but everyone knows the tailor's back door. Fashion never dies. It just changes cloaks." That night you sleep near the Thames, wrapped in a borrowed blanket and the memory of blue velvet untouched by royal skin. You wonder if the cloak was ever worn, or if it still sits somewhere in a chest, uncreased, undeniably beautiful, waiting for a moment when the rules no longer matter. It's the hour before dawn, when the streets of Bern are still and the snow softens every sound into a hush. You're walking with the city's night watch lantern in hand, boots crunching quietly over the icy cobbles. The year is 1537, and the wind tastes of chimney soot and distant pine. Beside you is Hans Keller, a watchman with a limp and a lantern full of opinions. He's been on this beat since before the Reformation split the churches, and he claims to have once arrested a bishop for loitering. "Wasn't technically loitering," he says, sniffing, "but he was standing still and thinking. That's always trouble." Tonight Hans is muttering about velvet. "A hat," he grumbles. "A asterisk hat, asterisk, mind you. Not a sword, not a stolen purse, but a bit of fabric on someone's head, and asterisk, suddenly asterisk, it's treason." You raise an eyebrow. Someone's in trouble over a hat. Hans stops, points. Ahead of you, standing beneath a frost-rimed archway, is a man wrapped in a dark cloak, one foot propped against the wall, humming a slow, sad tune. His breath plumes in the cold, and on his head, glistening faintly in the lantern light, a hat. Soft black velvet with a tiny silver clasp shaped like a thistle. You both approach. The man looks up. He's young, maybe 20, clean-shaven, nervous eyes. "Evening," Hans says with a tone that makes evening sound like an accusation. "Just out for air," the man replies too quickly. Hans nods at the hat. "That yours?" The man hesitates. "Yes," he says. "No family crest?" "No." "Occupation?" "Musician." Hans folds his arms. Musicians are allowed felt, maybe wool. Velvet's restricted to members of the gross rat or landowners with holdings above 50 fields. The man swallows. It was a gift. Hans sighs. They always are. Here's the thing. In 16th century, Berne sumptuary laws were detailed asterisk and asterisk enforced. Following the Reformation, the city embraced moral clarity with a kind of bureaucratic zeal. Clothing was a matter of discipline. Hats especially were symbolic, used to distinguish class trade allegiance. The wrong hat could get you fined. The right one could get you asterisk watched. Asterisk. And this velvet hat, it is asterisk, not asterisk, the right one. But the man insists. I was told it was legal as long as I wore it without plume or badge. Hans raises an eyebrow. You were told wrong. Here comes the odd moment. Just then a window creaks open above you. A woman leans out, rubbing her eyes, curls bouncing in the lamplight. Leave him be, she calls. He played at my niece's wedding. We paid him in coin asterisk and asterisk cloth. Madam, Hans says without looking up, you paid him above his station. She shrugs. He played above his station. And just like that, she closes the window. Silence. The musician shifts his weight. Look, I'll take it off. I didn't mean to. Hans waves him off. No need, he says. I'm not fining you. The man blinks. You're not? I'm keeping the hat. The musician's jaw drops. What? Hans gently removes it, dusts it off, and plops it onto his own head. How do I look, he asks you. You pause. Like someone who's about to get reported by their own supervisor. He grins. Let him. I've been cold for 20 years. You walk on the three of you past shuttered storefronts and frozen gutters. The sky is beginning to shift indigo, pressing toward silver. Behind you, the musician vanishes into the alley. Hans doesn't say much more. But as the dawn breaks and the sun turns the rooftops gold, you glance sideways and catch him adjusting the velvet brim. Later, over boiled coffee in a tavern cellar, he finally mutters, "They can't keep dignity wrapped in cloth, no matter how many laws they write." Historians rarely record moments like this. There are official lists of arrests, fines, confiscations, but no ledger of asterisk mercy asterisk, no archive of shared warmth in the cold hour before sunrise. Still, there's a footnote in one city record from early 1537. Asterisk one velvet hat seized from unauthorized wearer. Property not returned. No fine issued. Asterisk. Some speculate the hat made its way into the hands of a noble's son. Others believe it stayed with Hans. And a few romantics even now whisper that it passed from watchman to watchman quietly, unofficially, on the coldest nights when hierarchy mattered less than heat. You finish your coffee, step back into the morning. The snow has stopped, and somewhere down the street a man in a wool coat walks alone, head bare, dignity intact, having given up his velvet in exchange for a few more minutes of freedom. Or perhaps more simply in exchange for kindness. The smell hits you first, salt water and something darker, almost chemical, like seaweed and secrets. You're in Venice, 1592, at the far edge of the docks, where the gondoliers won't go after sunset, and the dye merchants keep their doors half closed even in daylight. The air is humid, heavy with the breath of the lagoon, and every surface glistens like it's been licked by time. You're following a girl. She moves fast, slipping between crates and piles of drying nets, her footsteps careful, soundless. She wears a kerchief over her hair and a gray apron stained in blues, reds, and something that looks suspiciously purple. Not the kind of purple you find in a noble's parlor, no. This is something wilder, richer, deep as midnight with a shimmer like oil on water. She disappears into a narrow warehouse that smells of damp rope and fermented indigo. Inside 5 people are at work, bent over vats, stirring, folding, weighing powders with the caution of apothecaries and the wariness of smugglers. You know immediately this isn't legal. In Venice, the production of asterisk, asterisk, Tyrian purple, asterisk, asterisk, the ancient, almost mythic dye extracted from sea snails, was banned for commoners centuries ago. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was asterisk power. Asterisk. In the Roman Empire, it was worn only by emperors. In Venice, only the Doge and certain foreign dignitaries had the right. Everyone else forbidden. So how in this ramshackle building are peasants dyeing cloth in a color said to belong only to gods? You watch as the girl dips a swatch of linen into a vat and pulls it out slowly. The color shifts as the air hits it, blue to violet, to an impossible depth of hue that seems to buzz against your eyes. She smiles, she's proud, she's 16, and she has no idea you're here. A man in the corner coughs loudly, then mutters something in Venetian dialect. Shut the door. Too much wind. It changes the color. You move closer, trying not to disturb anything. Every bucket seems ancient. Every scrap of dyed fabric hums with quiet defiance. Here comes the odd moment. Someone drops a bolt of cloth. It spills across the floor like spilled wine, and you see hidden beneath it a small crest stamped into the wood beneath a winged lion, the symbol of the state. The dye shop isn't rogue. It's asterisk protected, asterisk. You step back. No one notices. Later outside, an old woman selling mussels on the canal steps leans toward you. They say the Doge himself commissions his private cloth here, she says, then outlaws the same color for everyone else. You frown. Why allow them to make it at all? She shrugs, because beauty never obeys the law. It only negotiates with it. Venice had always been full of contradictions. Its sumptuary laws, some of the strictest in Europe, were also among the most widely ignored, especially by those rich enough to pay the fines in advance. It was said that a noble could wear anything as long as he was willing to be taxed like a prince. But this dye was different. Tyrian purple wasn't just expensive, it was symbolic. To wear it without permission was to impersonate power itself. Historians have long debated whether Venice truly had a secret workshop for forbidden dyes. Some say it's a myth spun by rival cities. Others point to obscure tax records that mention unexplainable purchases, unmarked barrels, imported lime sudden drops in local snail populations. And a few argue quite convincingly that the entire operation was overseen by a branch of the state itself. A silent pact. A color too beautiful to destroy, but too dangerous to let go free. You walk the alleys of the city now, noticing splashes of plum silk beneath cloaks, hints of violet ribbon at a noblewoman's sleeve, the glint of a merchant's lining visible only when he turns too quickly. Clues, traces, proof that somewhere someone always slips past the rules. At the edge of the canal, you see the girl again. She's carrying a folded cloth in her arms, wrapped like something holy. As she passes you, her eyes flicker toward yours. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't look away. That night, the stars shimmer faintly over the water. Gondolas rock in their sleep. The bell of San Marco tolls once gently, as if not to wake the city. And in a small warehouse by the docks, forbidden beauty soaks in silence, becoming what it always was, a secret too vivid to be forgotten. The house is quiet now, not silent, but the kind of hush that settles after too many years and too few visitors. You're in the countryside outside Lyon in the winter of 1709, and the frost has crept in under the windowsills like a polite thief. The manor is old, square, and sagging under the weight of stories no one tells anymore. You walk carefully down a corridor lined with portraits, all proud noses and powdered wigs, crumbling gilded frames, names half faded under dust. The air smells of lavender sachets, mothballs, and wood long past its prime. You reach the end of the hallway, and there behind a door warped from humidity is the closet. It takes effort to open. The hinges groan, and a breath of stale perfume wafts out like a sigh from another century. Inside, stacked, folded, hidden away, are garments that should not exist anymore. You step in. One step, two. The floor creaks. You're surrounded now. Crimson silk waistcoats, gowns embroidered with gold thread and lined with fox fur, a stomacher sewn with pearls, shoes with buckles made of silver and, yes, tiny diamonds, and at the very back still hanging still regal a coat made entirely of cloth of gold with cuffs that sparkle faintly in the lantern light. You touch it. It's heavier than it looks. Cool like metal, like a lie. This closet, you realize, is illegal. And yet it remains. Here's what happened. In the late 17th century, the French crown had attempted for the 100th time to enforce sumptuary restrictions, mostly targeting rural nobility and merchant families pretending to be more important than they were. Edicts were issued, inspectors dispatched, fines levied, tailors harassed. But this family, whoever they were, had ignored it all. Or perhaps outlived it. You hear footsteps behind you. A woman appears, older than the house almost, wrapped in shawls. Her eyes are bright sharp. She nods toward the garments. My grandfather hid them, she says. He wore lace at court, was fined twice, and told them he'd rather die in gold than live in gray. You smile. Did he? He died in linen, she replies, but he left the gold for memory. You both stand there a moment. She gestures toward the coat. They made laws because they thought people would obey. But clothes don't disappear when you outlaw them. They go underground, into trunks, into closets, into stories. You nod, and then they wait. Historians have found hundreds of records of confiscated clothing across France, but just as many garments never appeared in the official ledgers. They vanished, smuggled into attics, folded into dowries, sewn into curtains, hidden in closets like this one. Some say entire wardrobes were sealed away and passed down like heirlooms, not to be worn, but to be remembered. To prove, perhaps, that once, just once, a merchant's daughter danced in a velvet gown that could have shamed a duchess. You ask the woman if she ever tried them on. She smiles. Once, when I was 13. The stomacher nearly strangled me, but I never felt more alive. You walk out together, down the corridor, past the portraits, each one looking slightly smug now that you know what's behind the wall. The sun is beginning to rise, and the frost on the windows glows like powdered sugar. You step outside. The cold slaps your cheeks, but you don't mind, because you know something now. That sumptuary laws never truly worked. They regulated what people wore in public asterisk, but behind closed doors, in candlelight, beneath floorboards and forgotten drawers, people kept their silks and feathers and jeweled cuffs. They kept them not just for pride, but for defiance, for dreaming, for identity. And tonight in this dream you opened the door. You saw what was meant to stay hidden, and found beauty outlawed, untouched, and waiting. Waiting not to be worn, but simply to be known. The wind is softer now. You've walked through centuries of fabric and law, through alleys of lace and courtrooms of collars. You've heard the rustle of velvet in forbidden gardens, watched linen unravel under the weight of rules, and stood beside tailors who stitched rebellion with quiet hands. And through it all, you've seen what the laws could never understand. That clothing is never just clothing. It's memory, desire, defiance, dignity, the way we declare who we are even when no one believes us. Tonight, perhaps for the first time, you wore what couldn't be worn. You slipped into robes sewn with stories. You touched gloves made for bishops and sleeves stitched with hope. You stood barefoot in a village that dyed blue against a world that told them to stay gray. And now it's time to rest. Let the buttons count themselves. Let the hats sit where they please. Let the last shimmer of forbidden silk fold itself into your dream. The fire has faded. The shadows have softened. Even the old wardrobe stands quiet again, its secrets tucked away for another night. Breathe in once more, let it go slowly. Feel the weight of the day loosen like laces being unfastened. And if you wake before morning, don't worry. Just remember the smell of beeswax and the sound of gold thread being pulled through cloth. Remember the boy with the mud-soaked doublet, the widow who wore her mourning like armor, the monk who prayed in lavender. Some stories don't need to be believed, only remembered. And now your dream closet waits, not with rules, but with freedom. Quiet night, good night.